She stood still, confused, not knowing where to start from, quiet tears dripping down her tired face. Her boy. Her only boy. How do I go about this, she asked, overwhelmed by the truth that reminds her that in 7 days, just 7 days, her only son will be gone if nothing is done. The boy did not cry when the matchmaker told his mother the truth. He only stood beside her chair, one small hand resting on the worn sleeve of her sweater, while the old woman across the table folded her glasses and said in a tired voice, "I have searched every file twice, Clara. There is only one man whose bloodline matches your son's condition closely enough to make the doctors hopeful." Clara's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Outside the office window, late autumn rain ran in crooked lines down the glass. The street below shimmered gray and cold, and the neon sign from the pharmacy across the road flickered in the puddles like a weak heartbeat. "And who is he?" Clara asked. The matchmaker hesitated, not because she enjoyed suspense. She was too old for that, too softened by years of watching women come to her with impossible requests and leave, with their pride carefully tucked back into place. No, she hesitated because she knew the name would not land like information. It would land like judgment, like memory, like a door forced open. "He is Elias Barron." The room went soundless. Not silent, soundless, as if even the rain had drawn back. Clara did not move at first. Her face remained steady, almost composed, but the color left it in a slow withdrawal, like warmth abandoning a house room by room. Only Noah looked up at her. He was 7, small for his age, with serious eyes that seemed always to be waiting for adults to tell the truth. His dark curls were still damp around the edges from the rain. A paper wristband from the hospital peeked out beneath his coat cuff. "Mama?" he said softly. Clara blinked. Once. Then she bent and lifted his chin, not because he needed comforting, but because she did. "It's nothing," she whispered. But it was not nothing. Elias Barron. Even after 8 years, the name still had weight. It still carried summer heat and train smoke and a promise spoken under a sky too wide for caution. It still held the last letter she had never answered, and the life she had chosen afterward, one stitched together with work, restraint, and the stubborn dignity of getting through each day without asking anyone to rescue her. Across the table, the matchmaker cleared her throat. "I did not know there was history," she said. "If I had, I would have prepared the matter more gently." Clara let out a dry breath that might once have become a laugh, if life had not worn laughter down into something rarer and more private. "There is no gentle way to say that," she replied. Noah shifted closer to her leg. The matchmaker opened the file in front of her. "His foundation has recently begun funding rare treatment cases. The medical panel requested deeper family tracing due to Noah's markers. The records were complicated, but the possibility is strong enough that the doctors want him contacted." Clara stared at the papers but did not read them. On the top sheet was a photograph clipped to a profile. Not recent, perhaps a year old. Elias stood outside some tall glass building in a charcoal coat, one hand in his pocket, the other reaching for a car door held open by someone just outside the frame. He was older, sharper in the face, the softness at the mouth gone. Wealth had touched him the way winter touches a tree by revealing structure, not mercy. "He doesn't know," Clara said. It was not a question. "No." The matchmaker lowered her voice. "Does he truly not know the boy is his?" Clara looked at Noah. He was studying the rain now, tracing one drop with his finger along the fogged edge of the window pane. He knew better than to interrupt adult pain, though she had never wanted him to learn that so young. "No," Clara said again. "He has no idea." The old woman nodded once, slowly, with that grave kind of understanding that belongs only to people who have lived long enough to stop being shocked by human sorrow. Then Noah turned and asked the question children always ask when they sense fear moving through a room. "Is he a bad man?" Clara's mouth parted, but no answer came at once. Because the honest answer was not simple. No, he was not bad. But goodness had very little to do with what happened when love met timing, pride, distance, and silence. She crouched in front of him and buttoned the top button of his coat, though it was already fastened. "I don't know what kind of man he is now," she said carefully. "But once, a long time ago, he was kind to me." Noah accepted this. Children often accept half the truth when it is given gently. The matchmaker slid the folder toward her. "You do not need to decide today." But Clara knew that was exactly what she had to do, because when you have a child whose life depends on what pride can no longer afford, decisions are no longer made in comfort, They are made in corridors, in rain, in borrowed chairs, and under fluorescent lights while the world goes on buying flowers and pastries and umbrellas. As if some mothers are not being asked to reopen the graves of their former lives just to keep breathing. She picked up the folder. The paper felt cold. By the time they left the office, the rain had sharpened into needles. Clara tucked the file beneath her coat and held Noah's hand as they crossed to the bus stop. Cars sprayed dirty water at the curb. A woman in red heels laughed into her phone beneath an awning. Somewhere nearby, a delivery truck backed up with a mechanical beeping that sounded rude in the damp evening. Noah leaned against her side. "Will we still get soup?" Clara looked down at him. He had been in and out of hospitals for months, and still he measured life by small certainties. Soup, the blue blanket at home, the Thursday night radio program their landlord played too loudly through the vent, the cracked ceramic dog on the windowsill, the biscuit from Mrs. Vila downstairs when she remembered. "Yes, honey," Clara said. "We'll still get soup. Tomato?" "If the shop hasn't sold out," he nodded, satisfied. At the bus stop, she opened the folder again despite herself. Profile summary. Financial disclosures, foundation work. Residence details split between the city and an estate 2 hours north. No wife listed. No children. No public scandals worth noting beyond the usual speculative pieces written about rich men who smiled too little and attended charity galas alone. There were 2 photographs inside. In one, Elias was seated at a long conference table, listening to someone off camera with that same intense stillness he'd once had as a young man repairing a broken radio in her aunt's kitchen. In another, he stood beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair, at the opening of a hospice wing bearing his mother's name. His expression in both was composed, controlled, distant. Lonely, she thought before she could stop herself. Then she closed the file sharply. Noah tipped his head. "Does he have a nice face?" The question startled something tender and dangerous in her. What kind of question is that? The kind where you answer. His seriousness nearly undid her. She looked out at the street. "Yes, baby," she said. "He has a nice face? Like mine?" She couldn't help but smiled and turned back to him. "I think yours is nice, Caesar, honey." There it was. The echo she had spent years pretending others did not notice. The shape around the eyes. The stillness when he was uncertain. Even the slight tilt of his head when waiting for an answer that mattered more than he wanted to admit. Her throat tightened. "A little," she said. Noah seemed pleased by that. The bus arrived with a sigh of brakes. It was crowded and smelled of wet coats, metal poles, and old heat. Clara found them 2 seats near the back. Noah sat by the window, pressing a circle into the fog with his palm so he could watch the blurred city pass. She kept the folder closed on her lap all the way home. Not because she was done with it. Because she was afraid that if she opened it again, memory would not remain memory. It would become invitation. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a narrow brick building that had once been painted yellow and then forgotten by time. The stairwell smelled faintly of onions, detergent, and old wood. Mrs. Vila's television murmured behind her door on the 2nd landing. Somewhere above, a baby was crying in short, outraged bursts. Clara paused twice on the stairs, not from weakness exactly, but from the accumulated heaviness of the day. No one noticed, of course, he always noticed. "I can carry the bread," he offered. He was already holding the soup container and the paper bag from the grocer, but he said it with solemn usefulness, and Clara kissed the top of his head. "You already carry enough," inside. The apartment was cold in the way only humble homes can be before evening warmth is made by hand. Clara switched on the lamp beside the sofa. A honey-colored glow touched the room's frayed corners. The furniture did not match, the curtains had been hemmed twice. The kitchen tiles were cracked near the sink. But everything was clean, everything cared for. A child's drawing hung on the refrigerator. 3 figures holding hands beneath a crooked yellow sun. One of the figures was much taller than the others and wore a blue tie. Clara looked away from it at once. Noah placed the soup on the table and went to wash his hands. Clara stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, palms flat on the counter, listening to the pipes knock inside the wall. Then she took the folder from under her coat and slid it into the drawer beneath the cutlery. As if paper could burn through wood dot, they ate in near silence, but it was not an unhappy silence. Noah was tired. Clara was thinking too hard. The radio in the next apartment played a piano tune she half recognized from years ago, and for a few minutes the world was simple enough to bear. Spoon against bowl, steam rising, a boy trying not to yawn. Halfway through his soup, Noah looked up. "Did you know him before me?" The spoon stopped in Clara's hand. Children did not always ask the right question. but sometimes they asked the exact one adults had spent years circling. Yes, she said. Was he your friend? She could have lied. Not a full lie, just the kind mothers tell to delay pain until a child is stronger. But Noah had lived too long with blood tests and hospital rooms not to deserve sincerity. He was, she said. For a while, then what happened? She looked at the steam lifting from her bowl. Life happened. Noah frowned, dissatisfied. That sounds like when doctors say we're monitoring things because they don't want to explain. Despite herself, Clara smiled. That is an unfairly accurate observation. He returned to his soup, but not before saying, maybe he was lonely too. She stared at him. Why would you say that, baby? Noah shrugged, the way children do when intuition seems too obvious to defend. Because lonely people sometimes leave spaces for other lonely people. Then he coughed, a small dry cough that should not have frightened her as much as it did. Clara reached automatically for the glass of water beside him. He waved her concern away with practiced patience. I'm okay. But later, when he had gone to change into his pajamas, she stood in the kitchen and gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles whitened. This was why pride had to die. This was why ghosts had to be disturbed. Not for romance. Not for closure. Not because memory had suddenly become sweet enough to revisit. For him, only for him, after Noah fell asleep, Clara took the folder back out. The apartment had quieted into its night sounds. A radiator ticking awake, distant tires on wet pavement, someone upstairs dragging a chair across the floor. She sat at the small table by the lamp and spread the papers carefully, as if order might somehow make choice easier. At the bottom of the stack was a formal contact card for Barron Holdings. Beneath that, tucked almost carelessly between the documents, was a printed article from a business magazine. The headline read, Elias Barron, the man who built an empire and lives like a guest in IT. She should not have read it. She read every word. It described efficiency, austerity, relentless standards. A man who arrived early, stayed late, funded hospitals quietly, and declined every invitation that was not strictly necessary. A man whose staff called him fair but unreachable. A man photographed often in rooms full of people and somehow always appearing alone. One line caught in her chest. Those close to Barron say he never truly recovered from a personal loss in his 20s, though no one speaks of it directly. Clara folded the page before she could finish the paragraph. Never recovered. The words angered her, because they suggested symmetry where none existed. He had gone on to wealth, influence, polished grief in tailored coats. She had gone on to bus fares, clinic waiting rooms, hemming old dresses, and waking each morning to the same private calculation, how to keep fear from becoming the atmosphere her son breathed. And yet anger did not fully hold. Memory kept slipping through. A train platform in summer. His hand wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he hated. The way he listened when she spoke, as though what she said altered the room itself. A silver coin he once placed in her palm and told her to keep until life becomes too sensible. The promise he made before leaving. The one she had believed only because she was young enough then to think sincerity protected people from circumstance. Her eyes lifted to the kitchen window. Rain still moved across the glass, gentler now. In the bedroom, Noah murmured in his sleep. Clara rose and went to him. His room was barely more than an alcove, but she had made it tender, a shelf of library books, a faded moon and stars lamp, one knitted blanket from her late mother folded at the foot of the bed. Noah slept with one hand open on the pillow, as if even in dreams he expected to receive something. She touched his forehead. Too warm? No. Perhaps. It was hard to tell when fear had rewritten all her measures. On the shelf beside the bed sat a small wooden horse with one repaired leg. Elias had carved it during those last weeks years ago, when he had come to her aunt's house with splinters in his fingers and ambition hidden beneath modest shirts, before money made people rewrite his beginnings into legend. He had laughed at how poor the carving was, but Noah had loved it from the first day he was old enough to choose a favorite toy. He never knew where it came from. Clara picked it up and ran her thumb over the smooth-worn neck. A keepsake, a mistake. A witness. She looked at her sleeping son and understood with the exhausted clarity that sometimes arrives only after resistance has burned out, that the past was not asking permission anymore. It was already at the door. The next morning began before dawn with Noah's coughing. Not violent. Not dramatic. Just enough to send Clara upright in bed with her heart hammering. She hurried to his room and found him sitting up, pale in the moon-colored light. One hand pressed to his chest as if embarrassed by his own body. I'm okay, he said again. Children with frightened mothers learn repetition. She sat beside him until the coughing eased, then wrapped him in the knitted blanket and carried him to the sofa, though he was getting big for carrying. He laid his head against her shoulder without protest. By 6, rain had stopped. A weak silver morning entered through the curtains. Clara called the hospital hotline. They told her to monitor him. Bring him in if it worsened. Keep him warm. Keep him calm. She thanked them and hung up with the quiet fury of people instructed to do what they have already been doing with all the strength they have left. Noah dozed against her. On the table lay the contact card. She stared at it until the numbers blurred. Then carefully, so as not to wake him, she reached for the phone. Her fingers hovered. 8 years. What does one say to a man who does not know he has a child? What does one say to the boy she once loved before he became someone strangers wrote profiles about? What does one say when the first truth must arrive carrying all the others behind it? Nothing elegant came. Only necessity. She dialed the number. The line rang 3 times before a woman answered in a smooth professional tone. Office of Mr. Barron. Clara nearly ended the call. Instead she said, "My name is Clara Vale. I need to speak with Elias Barron."
If you're enjoying this emotional journey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of this story. Drop a comment below to tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story moved you the most. Your support helps this channel grow, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's share this story together.
Now, 8 years collapsed into the space between one breath and the next. "What kind of case?" he asked finally. Clara opened her eyes. "A rare blood disorder," she said. "The doctors are exploring compatibility options. And you believe I'm relevant to that?" "I don't believe," she said. I know, that was the moment something shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically. But inside Elias, a quiet, precise mechanism began to turn, one that had nothing to do with business, strategy, or control. Something instinctive. Something unsettled. He walked slowly around his desk, the phone pressed to his ear, his reflection following him faintly in the glass. "How would you know that?" he asked. Clara did not answer right away, because this was the edge. A place where truth stopped being something that could be introduced gently. But she wasn't ready, not yet. Not like this, not in the first minutes of hearing his voice again after all these years. "Because I was told," she said carefully. "By whom?" "The medical team, and they connected me directly to you?" "Yes." Elias's jaw tightened. He was not a man who liked unknown variables, especially not ones that reached into his life uninvited. "This is highly irregular," he said. "There are protocols for—" "I know," Clara interrupted softly. He stopped. Not because of the interruption, because of the tone. She had always spoken like that when she needed him to stop thinking and start listening, and it still worked. On the other end, Clara shifted Noah gently onto the sofa, easing a cushion beneath his head. He murmured but did not wake. She stood moving a few steps away, as if distance from him, even through the phone, might help her find the right words. "I didn't call you to go through systems," she said. "I called you because this matters more than that." Elias turned slightly, looking out over the city. Morning had begun properly now. Cars moved in steady lines below. People crossed intersections with purpose. Life unfolding, as it always did, indifferent to the past, resurfacing in quiet rooms. "And why does it matter to me?" he asked. The question was simple, too simple. Clara pressed her fingers lightly against her temple. "Because he is yours. Because he has your eyes. Because every day I chose not to tell you, I told myself I was protecting something, but I never decided who." Her breath caught. Not yet. She wasn't ready, not while his voice still held distance, not while the years between them still stood intact. "Instead," she said, "because you're the only one who can help him." Elias's gaze hardened slightly. "That's not an answer, it's the truth." Silence again. But this time it was different. Less defensive. More searching. "What's the child's name?" he asked. Clara hesitated. Then, softly, "Noah." Elias repeated it once, under his breath. Noah. The name meant nothing to him. And yet, something about it lingered. He shook the thought off. How old is he? 7. Another pause. Elias moved back to his desk and sat down slowly, his fingers resting against the polished surface. 7. 8 years ago. No. That was coincidence, it had to be. He leaned back slightly in his chair. "I'll have my medical team review the case," he said, his tone returning to something more structured. "Send the details through the foundation office. I'll make sure it's prioritized." Clara closed her eyes. This was exactly what she had expected, and exactly what she had hoped to avoid. No, she said. The word landed quietly, but firmly. Elias frowned. No? I'm not sending it through the foundation. Then how do you expect? I want you to see him. That stopped him. Completely. Not because the request was unreasonable, but because of how she said it. Not as a plea. Not as a demand. As something inevitable. Elias sat still, his fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the desk. That's not how this works, he said. It is now. A faint, almost incredulous breath escaped him. You've always been very certain when you decide something, he said. Clara almost smiled. You taught me that. Via another silence. But this one carried something else with it. Memory. Uninvited, but unmistakable. Elias leaned forward slightly. Clara, he said, more carefully now. You're asking me to step into something without context. You won't explain the situation fully, you won't go through proper channels. And you want me to meet a child I've never heard of. Yes. And you expect me to agree to that? Clara's voice softened. Yes. The simplicity of her answer unsettled him more than any argument would have, because it wasn't persuasion. It was certainty. He stood again, restless now, moving toward the window. Below, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Inside him, something less orderly was beginning to move. Where are you? He asked. Clara glanced around the apartment, the chipped paint, the small table, the quiet evidence of a life built carefully, without excess. In the city, she said. Near the East District. That's not an address. I know. Elias exhaled slowly. You're making this unnecessarily difficult. No, she said gently. I'm making it real. He closed his eyes briefly. And for the first time since the call began, something inside him shifted not toward understanding, not yet, but toward willingness. A small, reluctant opening. When? He asked. Clara's heart tightened. Today, she said. That's not possible. It is. I have a full schedule. So did I, she replied quietly. Before this, that landed. He knew what she meant, not specifically. But enough. Elias looked at his reflection in the glass. For years, he had built a life that allowed him to control every variable, every interaction, every outcome, and now Clara. A child. A request with no clear structure. No explanation, only wait. He opened his eyes. Send me the address, he said. Clara didn't respond immediately. Relief didn't come. Only a deeper, steadier kind of tension. All right, she said. Elias hesitated, then, almost without intending to ask Clara, yes? Why didn't you tell me, back then? The question slipped out before he could stop it. It hung between them, fragile and sharp. Clara looked toward Noah. He was still sleeping, still small. Still hers. Her voice, when she answered, was very quiet. Because some truths don't arrive at the right time, she said. And by the time they do, they don't belong to just one person anymore. Elias said nothing. Because for the first time since the call began, he wasn't sure what the truth was. That afternoon, the sky cleared just enough to let pale sunlight touch the rooftops. Clara stood by the window, watching the street below. Noah sat on the sofa, wrapped in his blanket, drawing something slowly on a piece of paper. Is he coming? Noah asked without looking up. Clara hesitated. Yes, she said. What should I say to him? The question caught her off guard. She turned to him. You don't have to say anything, she replied. Noah nodded. Then, after a moment, will he stay? Clara looked at the door, at the space beyond it. At the years between now and then. I don't know, she said. And this time she didn't soften the truth.
If you're enjoying this emotional journey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of this story. Drop a comment below to tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story moved you the most. Your support helps this channel grow, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's share this story together.
Elias did not bring anyone with him. No assistant. No driver waiting at the curb. No quiet entourage that usually followed him at a distance like a shadow trained to remain invisible. He came alone. Even he did not fully understand why. Perhaps because something about Clara's voice that morning had made this feel different. Not business, not obligation. Not even charity, something narrower, more personal, and more dangerous. The building stood exactly where she had said, on a narrow street that seemed too small for the kind of life he had built. The paint on the exterior had faded unevenly. The entrance door bore the marks of years of use. A loose intercom hung slightly crooked beside the frame. Elias stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Not hesitating, assessing, the way he always did before stepping into unfamiliar territory. But this wasn't unfamiliar, that was the problem. There was something about the air, something faint and unplaceable, that reminded him of a life he had carefully folded away and stored somewhere he did not visit. He reached forward and pressed the buzzer. A crackling sound followed. Then Clara's voice, quieter now, closer than it had been over the phone. "Yes? It's me." A pause. Not long, just enough to acknowledge the weight of recognition. Then the soft click of the door unlocking. "Come up." The stairwell smelled faintly of old wood and something cooking, simple, warm, human. Elias moved upward slowly, his hand brushing the rail without gripping it. His footsteps echoed lightly, though he made no effort to quiet them. On the second landing, a door opened slightly and an elderly woman glanced out, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. She took in his coat, his posture, the quiet authority he carried without trying. Then she disappeared again without a word. By the time he reached the third floor, something inside him had already shifted. Not visibly, but enough. Clara stood in the doorway before he could knock. For a moment neither of them spoke. Time does not return gently. It does not reintroduce people slowly, as if easing them into recognition. It simply places them back in front of each other and waits. Clara looked older. Not in a way that diminished her. In a way that told the truth. Her face held lines that had not been there before. Her posture slightly more guarded, her eyes carrying something steadier and heavier than the girl he had once known. But she was still unmistakably herself. And Elias, he had changed in ways that could not be measured as easily. Sharper, perhaps, more contained, less open. Like a man who had learned how to exist without needing anything from anyone. And yet something in his expression, in the way he looked at her now, suggested that not everything had been successfully left behind. "You found it," Clara said softly. It was not a question. "I did." Another pause. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was small, not poorly kept, not neglected, just modest. Elias noticed everything without appearing to look. The worn edges of the furniture. The careful order, the absence of excess. The presence of effort. This was not a place shaped by comfort. It was shaped by discipline. By making things last longer than they were meant to. By choosing necessity over ease again and again. He stepped fully inside. The door closed quietly behind him. And then he saw the child. Noah sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, a sheet of paper resting on his knees. He looked up slowly, as if he had been waiting, but not impatiently, just ready. Children often meet the world with a kind of stillness adults lose over time. Elias did not move immediately. Something about the boy, something subtle, almost invisible, caught in his chest before he could understand it. Clara followed his gaze. "This is Noah," she said. Her voice remained steady, but her hands just slightly tightened at her sides. Noah shifted, placing the paper carefully beside him, then sat up straighter. He did not smile. He did not shrink. He simply looked at Elias with open, searching eyes. "Hello," Noah said. Elias stepped forward, slowly. "Hello." His voice was calm, controlled, but something beneath it had begun to move. He stopped a few steps away, not too close, not too distant. A measured distance. Clara watched both of them, not interrupting, not guiding, only observing, waiting. Elias glanced briefly at her, then back at the boy. "You're not afraid," he said. Noah considered the question. Should I be? Elias almost smiled, almost. "No," he said. "I don't think so." Noah nodded, as if confirming something privately. Then he gestured toward the paper he had set aside. "I was drawing," he said. "But I can show you later if you want." The offer was simple, unforced. Elias felt something tighten in his chest again. "I'd like that," he replied. Clara turned slightly toward the kitchen. "I made tea," she said. "If you want." Elias nodded once. "Yes." As she moved away, the room shifted again subtly but noticeably, leaving the two of them facing each other, alone. For the first time, Elias took another step forward. Then another, until he stood just close enough to see the details. The boy's features, the shape of his face, the quiet seriousness in his expression. And something else, something that did not belong to observation. Something that felt familiar. He dismissed it immediately. Coincidence. Projection. Memory playing tricks. It meant nothing. It had to mean nothing. What were you drawing? He asked. Noah reached for the paper and held it up. It was simple. 3 figures holding hands, a sun above them. The lines uneven, the proportions slightly off in the way children's drawings always are. But the intention was clear. Elias looked at it longer than expected. Who are they? He asked. Noah. That's me, a small figure on the left. And that's Mama, the middle one. Then he hesitated just for a moment, before pointing to the third. And that one? He looked up at Elias. I haven't decided yet. The words landed gently, but they did not leave gently. Elias felt something shift again deeper this time. More unsettling. He handed the drawing back. It's a good drawing, he said. Noah nodded, accepting the comment without pride. Just acknowledgement. Then he coughed soft, but enough. Clara returned immediately, placing the tea on the table before kneeling beside Noah. You okay? She asked. I'm okay, he said. The same words, repeated. Elias watched the exchange, the instinct, the familiarity, the quiet rhythm between them. And something inside him began to align in ways he did not yet understand. Clara adjusted the blanket around Noah, her movements careful, practiced. Then she stood. We should talk, she said to Elias. Not urgent, but necessary. Elias nodded. He followed her a few steps away far enough for privacy, but not so far that Noah was out of sight. Always in view, always present. Clara folded her arms lightly, not defensive, just holding herself steady. You saw him, she said. I did. A pause. Elias glanced toward Noah again. The boy was watching them now, quietly, observing. His condition, Elias said. How serious is it? Clara did not soften it. It's getting worse. How long? We don't know. What are the options? They're limited. Elias nodded slowly. Processing, structuring, trying to place everything into something he could understand. And where do I fit into this? He asked. Clara looked at him. Really looked, not at the man he had become, but at the one she had once known. You're the only viable match they've found so far, she said. For what? A transplant. The word hung between them, heavy, final. Elias's jaw tightened slightly. And are the doctors there certain? No, Clara said. But they're hopeful. He looked away briefly. Then back, and you came to me directly because, yes, he stopped. Because something in her expression, something restrained, something carefully held back, did not match the simplicity of that answer. You're still not telling me everything, he said. Clara didn't respond, not immediately. Because this was the edge again. The place where truth could no longer be delayed much longer. Behind them, the boy Noah shifted on the sofa, his small hand tightening slightly in the blanket. Clara noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. She looked back at Elias, and for the first time since he arrived, there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not restraint, not distance. Something closer to surrender. He deserves to know you, she said quietly. Elias frowned. That's not what we're discussing. Yes, it is. No, he said, more firmly now. We're discussing a medical situation. A procedure. He deserves more than that. The interruption was soft. But it stopped him completely. Elias stared at her. Because suddenly, this wasn't structured anymore. This wasn't controlled. This was something else. Something he could not categorize. What are you trying to say? He asked. Clara's breath caught just slightly. Her eyes flicked toward Noah, then back to Elias, and in that moment, everything that had been held back for years stood just beneath the surface. Waiting, not yet spoken, but no longer hidden.
If you're enjoying this emotional journey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of this story. Drop a comment below to tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story moved you the most. Your support helps this channel grow, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's share this story together.
Clara looked at Elias for a long moment. This was it. There are moments in life when everything changes not loudly, not with drama, but with one sentence that cannot be taken back. Her hands were steady now. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear had already done all it could. What are you trying to say? Elias asked again. His voice was calm, but not relaxed. Clara took a breath. Then she said it. He's your son. The words were soft. but they landed like something heavy breaking. For a second Elias did not react. Not because he didn't hear, but because his mind refused to accept it. "What?" he said. Clara didn't look away. "Noah is your son." Silence filled the room. Behind them, Noah sat very still on the sofa, watching both of them. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew it mattered. Elias let out a short breath. Then he shook his head once. "No," he said. "That's not possible." Clara didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She only said, "It is." Elias stepped back slightly, like he needed space to think. "You would have told me," he said. "Back then you would have said something." Clara's eyes lowered for a second. "I didn't know at first," she said. Elias looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "I found out after you left. After you placed the silver coin in my hands and you left, you never came back." The words came slowly now, carefully. "I tried to reach you," she added. "But you were already gone." And then she stopped, because the rest was harder to say. "And then what?" Elias asked. Clara looked at him again. "And then I realized your life had already changed." Elias frowned. "That doesn't explain why you stayed silent for 7 years." "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't. Because your security mem never told you how I was pushed out when I came liking for you. I am my son, your own son, whom you never cared about. You forgot about everything we once shared. The last night you waved goodbye, leaving me to a coin, pregnancy, and to my fate." Tears rolling down her eyes. Another silence? Elias feels heavy now, not just confusion. Something deeper. Elias ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room. "I'm sorry it took me so long to return. You should have just found any other way to let me know," he said. "Imagine. You're telling me I have a 7-year-old son, and you're telling me now? Today, like this?" Clara didn't move. "Yes." His voice rose slightly. "So, why now?" Clara's answer came without delay. "Because he's sick." That stopped him. Completely. Elias looked toward Noah. The boy was watching him, not scared, not confused, just waiting. Elias's voice dropped. "How sick?" Clara swallowed. "The doctors say his condition is getting worse. And you think I'm the match. They think you might be." Elias stared at the floor for a second, then back at her. "And if I am?" Clara didn't answer immediately. "Because this wasn't just about treatment. It never was." "If you are," she said slowly, "then you could save his life." The room went quiet again. But now everything was different. Because now Elias wasn't just looking at a child. He was looking at a possibility. A connection, something that changed everything. He turned fully toward Noah. The boy shifted slightly under his gaze but didn't look away. "Did you know?" Elias asked. Noah blinked. "Know what?" Elias hesitated. Then he asked, "Did your mother tell you about me?" Noah looked at Clara. She gave him a small nod, not forcing, just allowing. Noah turned back to Elias. "She said there was someone," he answered. "But she didn't say who." Elias felt something tighten in his chest. "And what did you think?" he asked. Noah shrugged lightly. "I thought maybe you were busy." The answer was simple. Too simple. Elias didn't know what to say to that. Busy. As if that explained 7 years. As if that made it easier. Clara stepped closer now, not to interrupt. But because she could feel the shift happening and she didn't know where it would lead. "I didn't want him growing up waiting," she said softly. "Or wondering why he wasn't chosen." Elias looked at her. "I didn't know he existed." "I know." The words were not accusing. That made them heavier. Elias turned away again, walking a few steps toward the window. Outside, the street looked the same. People passing, cars moving, nothing changed. And yet everything had changed. He pressed his hand lightly against the glass. 7 years. 7 years of meetings, decisions, contracts, expansion, control. And all that time a child. His child. He let out a slow breath. Behind him, Noah coughed again, this time a little stronger. Clara moved quickly to him. "Hey," she said gently. "Easy." Noah the 7-year-old nodded, trying to stay calm. "I'm okay," he said again. Elias turned back. And something in him shifted again. But this time it wasn't confusion. It wasn't resistance, it was something else. Something deeper. Something instinctive. He walked back toward them. Slowly. Carefully. Like stepping into something fragile. "Does it hurt?" he asked. The question was for Noah. but it came out quieter than he expected. Noah thought about it. Sometimes, he said. Elias nodded. Not because he understood, but because he didn't know what else to do. Clara looked at him. For the first time since he arrived, there was no distance in her expression, only truth. This is why I called you, she said. Elias didn't respond right away. He looked at Noah again. At the small hands, the tired eyes, the quiet strength. And then something clicked. Not loudly. Not all at once, but enough. Enough for him to step closer. Enough for him to sit down on the edge of the sofa. Closer now, not just physically. Noah looked at him, studying him. The same way Elias had studied him earlier. Careful, curious. What do you do? Noah asked. The question caught Elias off guard. What do I do? Yeah. Noah tilted his head slightly. For work. Elias almost smiled. I run a company. Noah nodded. Is it hard? Yes. Do you like it? Elias paused. Then said, sometimes. Noah thought about that. Then said, I think being a parent is harder. The words were simple, but they hit deeper than anything else that had been said. Elias looked at Clara, then back at Noah, and for the first time he didn't feel like he was standing outside this life. He felt like he had just stepped into it, unprepared, too late. But still here. The hospital smelled too clean, not fresh. Not comforting, just empty. Clara sat in the waiting area, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't realized how hard she was gripping them until her fingers began to ache. Across from her, a clock ticked slowly. Too slowly. Every second felt like it was stretching on purpose. Noah had been taken in almost an hour ago. Elias stood by the window. He hadn't sat down once. Not since they arrived. Not since the doctors had explained everything again, risks, chances, complications. Words that sounded calm, but carried fear underneath. Clara glanced at him. He looked different here. Not like the man in the office. Not like the man in the photographs. Just a man, waiting, helpless, quiet. You should sit, Clara said softly. Elias didn't turn. I'm fine. She didn't push. Because she knew that tone, he wasn't fine. He just didn't know what to do with it. Earlier that morning, Noah had been quieter than usual. Not scared, just thoughtful. He sat on the hospital bed, his legs swinging slightly as he looked at Elias. Are you staying? Noah had asked. Elias didn't hesitate this time. Yes, Noah nodded. Then, after a moment, he said, okay, that was all. No questions, no conditions, just trust. Clara had watched that moment closely, because trust like that, it doesn't come easily. And it doesn't come twice. Back in the present, the waiting room felt colder. Clara shifted slightly in her chair. You didn't have to do this, she said. Elias finally turned. Yes, I did. No, she said gently. You had a choice. Elias walked toward her slowly. I still do, he said. And I made it. Clara looked at him. Really looked. There was no hesitation in his face now. No confusion. Only something steady. Something decided. You don't even know him, she said. Elias shook his head slightly. I do, he replied. Clara frowned. How? Elias sat down across from her. For the first time since they arrived. I know how he looks at things, he said. How he listens, how he waits before he speaks. He paused, then added quietly, I know that he doesn't ask for much. Clara's eyes softened. Elias continued, and I know that he deserves more than what he's been given. Silence settled between them. But it wasn't heavy anymore, just honest. A doctor walked past. Clara's body tensed instantly. But he didn't stop. Not yet, Elias noticed. They'll come, he said. Clara nodded, but her hands tightened again. Do you remember? She said suddenly, the summer before you left? Elias leaned back slightly. I remember, he said. You said something, she continued. On the last day, Elias didn't respond right away, because he knew exactly what she meant. I said a lot of things, he said carefully. Clara shook her head. No, she said. You said one thing that mattered. Elias looked at her. And for a moment the years disappeared. I said I'd come back, he admitted. Clara nodded. You did. Elias frowned slightly. No, he said. I didn't. Clara held his gaze. You're here now. The words were simple. But they carried something deeper. Not blame. Not forgiveness. Just truth. Elias didn't argue. because for the first time he understood. The waiting room door opened. Both of them stood at the same time. The doctor walked toward them. Calm, measured. Clara's heart pounded. Elias didn't move. He just watched. "Mrs. Vale," the doctor said. Clara nodded quickly. "Yes." The doctor gave a small, reassuring look. "The procedure is complete." Clara's breath caught. "And?" she asked. The doctor's voice softened. "He's stable." Everything stopped, just for a second. Then Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding for months. Her knees almost gave way. Elias stepped forward instinctively, steadying her before she fell. "He's okay?" she whispered. "Yes," the doctor said. "He's responding well." Clara covered her mouth. Tears came but quietly, not loud, not dramatic, just relief. Elias looked down for a moment, closing his eyes briefly, then back at the doctor. "And him?" Elias asked. The doctor understood. "You did well," he said. "We'll monitor both of you closely, but everything went as expected." Elias nodded once. No smile, no reaction, just acceptance. A few minutes later, Clara stood outside Noah's room. Her hand rested on the door handle. She didn't open it yet. She needed a second. Just one. Elias stood beside her, not rushing her, not speaking. Just there. Clara looked at him. "You stayed," she said. Elias met her eyes. "I told you I would." She nodded slowly. Then she opened the door. Noah lay in the bed, pale but peaceful. Machines beeped softly beside him. His small hand rested on the blanket. Clara walked in first, slowly, carefully, like she was stepping into something fragile. She reached his bedside and touched his hand. "I'm here," she whispered. Noah's eyes opened slightly. "Took you long enough?" he murmured. Clara let out a soft laugh through tears. "I was right outside." He blinked slowly. Then his eyes shifted. Past her, to Elias. Elias stood near the door. Still, unsure, for the first time. Noah looked at him, and even through the weakness he smiled. "You came back," he said. Elias felt something break open inside his chest. Not painfully, but deeply. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Noah nodded, satisfied. Then his eyes closed again. Resting. Safe. Clara looked at Elias. There were no words for this moment. None that would be enough, so she didn't try. She just stepped slightly to the side, making space. Not forcing, not asking. Just allowing. Elias hesitated, then walked forward, slowly, until he stood beside the bed. He looked down at Noah, at the small, quiet life he almost never knew, at the years he had missed, at the chance he had now. Carefully, he reached out and placed his hand lightly over Noah's. Noah didn't wake, but his fingers shifted slightly, holding on. And for the first time, Elias didn't feel like a visitor. Morning came quietly. No rain, no noise. Just soft light moving slowly through the hospital window. Clara sat beside Noah's bed, her hand resting gently over his. She hadn't slept much, but she didn't feel tired. Not the kind of tired she felt for years. This was different. This was lighter. Noah shifted slightly, then opened his eyes. "Mama?" he said softly. Clara leaned closer immediately. "I'm here." He blinked, adjusting to the light. "Did it work?" Clara smiled, small but real. "Yes," she said. "It worked." Young Noah let out a slow breath. "Okay," he whispered. As if that was enough, as if that answered everything. Later that day, Elias stood outside the room. He hadn't gone far. Just far enough to give them space. But not far enough to leave. He leaned against the wall, his hands in his pockets, staring down the quiet hallway. Everything had changed. And yet nothing around him looked different. Same walls. Same lights. Same silence. But inside him, nothing was the same anymore. The door opened. Clara stepped out. She looked at him for a moment. "He's asking for you," she said. Elias nodded. But he didn't move right away, Clara noticed. "He's not a stranger to you anymore," she said gently. Elias looked at her. "I know," he said. Then, after a pause, "I'm still trying to understand what I am to him." Clara's expression softened. "You don't have to understand it all today," she said. "Just show up." Elias held her gaze, then nodded. And this time he walked in. Noah was sitting up slightly now, supported by pillows. He looked small in the bed, but stronger than before. His eyes found Elias immediately. You came back again, Noah said. Elias gave a small nod. I said I would. Noah studied him for a second. Then asked, Are you staying? The question was simple, but it held everything. Elias walked closer. This time, without hesitation. He sat down beside the bed. Yes, he said. I'm staying, Noah nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Then after a moment, can I ask you something? Elias leaned slightly forward. Of course. Noah looked at him carefully. Are you my dad? The room went still. Clara stood near the door, quiet, not stepping in, not stepping away, just present. Elias looked at Noah, then at Clara, then back at Noah. And for the first time there was no hesitation. Yes, he said. Noah didn't react right away. He just looked at him, as if he was placing the word somewhere inside himself. Then he asked, Why didn't you come before? Elias felt the weight of that question. He didn't avoid it. I didn't know about you, he said honestly. Noah thought about that, then nodded. Okay, he said again. No anger, no blame, just acceptance. Children don't always hold on to pain the way adults do. Sometimes they just want the truth. A few weeks later, the apartment felt warmer. Not because anything had changed. The same furniture, the same curtains, the same small kitchen. But something inside it was different now. Alive. Noah sat on the floor, coloring carefully. His strength had started to return, slowly but surely. Clara stood by the stove, stirring a pot of soup, tomato, like always. Elias stood by the window, sleeves rolled slightly, looking at something in his hands, the small wooden horse. He turned it over gently. This was mine, he said. Clara glanced at him. You left it, she replied. I didn't know I had. Clara smiled faintly. I kept it. Elias looked at her. There was something quiet in that moment. Not heavy. Not complicated. Just understood. Noah looked up. That's my favorite, he said. Elias walked over and crouched beside him. Then I'm glad you have it. Noah studied him. Then asked, Are you going back to your big house? Elias paused, then shook his head. Not today. Noah smiled. Good. The days turned into weeks. And weeks into something steadier. Elias didn't disappear. He didn't step back into distance. He stayed. Not perfectly. Not easily. But consistently. He learned the rhythm of the small apartment. The quiet mornings. The simple meals. The way Noah asked questions without warning. The way Clara moved through the day with quiet strength. And slowly, without announcement, he became part of it. One evening, Noah sat at the table with his drawing, the same one. 3 figures. But this time he added something new. Clara leaned over slightly. What are you doing? She asked. Noah didn't look up. Fixing it, he said. Elias walked closer and saw. The 3rd figure was no longer empty. It had a face now, standing beside them, holding their hands. Elias felt something shift in his chest. Again, but this time it wasn't confusion, it wasn't loss. It was something steady, something full. Later that night, Clara stood by the window. Elias joined her. For a moment neither spoke. Then Clara said, I didn't think this would be how things turned out. Elias nodded. Neither did I. A pause. But I'm glad it did, he added. Clara looked at him. You missed a lot, she said. I know. But you're here now. Elias met her eyes. Yes, he said. I am, and this time it wasn't just a moment. It was a choice. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes we lose time. Sometimes we lose people. And sometimes we carry truths we don't know how to face. But life has a quiet way of giving us another chance. Not to fix everything, but to begin again. To show up, to choose differently, to love when it matters most. So if you're holding on to something, a regret, a distance,